There's an island just outside the Arctic Circle in between Greenland and Norway that I've always heard is just gorgeous. And I've always wondered, why has no one ever gone there and documented their experience? Why has no one ever shown the true beauty of the country and shared their day-by-day itinerary that you could possibly use if you ever wanted to go there and experience it for yourself? Why is this country so untouched by tourism and seems so ripe for the picking, and yet no one wants to do it? Well, I got fed up with it. And you don't have to worry anymore, because I did it. I love you! I love you. I love you. That's right, folks. I did it. I went to Iceland, and I documented my experience, and I want to share it with you. So here it is, the only video on the internet about a trip to Iceland, and more importantly, my trip to Iceland. Quick disclaimer, I'm going to have the names of everything on the screen anyway, but if there's anything that I can't remember the pronunciation of, I'm not going to bother saying it because I don't want to accidentally butcher anything. Also, I'm not saying that if you go to Iceland, this is everything you have to do or these are the best things to do. This is just the trip I had, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now, I know I said this was my trip to Iceland, but it was technically our trip because these two clowns decided to tag along. And yeah, it probably would have been more fun without them, but what's done is done. I can't change anything. So there's a road in Iceland that pretty much goes around the whole damn thing called the Ring Road, and that's where our journey was taking us for the next few days. Day 1. Our flight arrived nice and early in the morning at about 6 o'clock, and we flew into the Keflavik airport, which is about 40 minutes south of Reykjavik. We were spending the trip living out of a camper van, but we had a hotel booked for the first night because we were supposed to arrive there in the evening before the camper company was open. But because of a flight delay, we now arrived the morning after, so we didn't really need the hotel, but we decided to keep it because we figured after a long day of traveling, it would be nice to sleep in an actual bed the first night. The hotel that we had booked was the one that's like literally right across the street from the airport, so had it been the night before, it would have been really convenient. We stopped at duty free on our way out and we stocked up on a whole bunch of goodies, and then we grabbed our bags and we went out to the lobby and waited for the camper company to come pick us up. The camper company that we booked through was called Happy Campers. Happy Campers is only located like 10 minutes away from the airport, so if you book them and you already have a flight booked, you can just give them your flight information and they'll send a shuttle to the airport to come pick you up when you arrive. We got there about an hour before they opened, so when they opened, they just sent a shuttle to come get us. I would definitely recommend them and use them again because I can confidently say that for the entire trip, we were indeed happy campers. They lived up to the name, and that's all that matters. Also, I don't know if other camper companies do this or rental car companies do this, but at Happy Campers, they gave you a gas discount card that you could tap at gas stations, and I don't remember what the percentage was, but it took a little bit off of your gas expense, which is cool because gas is pricey. It was also super windy when we got there, and I knew that this was the rainy and windy time of year, but I stepped out of the airport and actually almost got blown off my feet. It was so strong. Luckily, this was the only day that was really like this, but unfortunately, this was the day of the food tour, and the food tour is a walking tour outside, so it kind of sucked having to do the food tour in the wind and the rain, but I can't control the weather. So after we had the camper van, we drove up to Reykjavik for our first event of the trip, which was the food tour. We found some parking and then walked a few blocks to meet up with our group and got going. As I said, it's a walking tour that takes you to about 5 different restaurants, and we loved it, but I'm sure it's even better if you have a nice day. I think it's rated as like one of the highest food tours, not only in the country, but in the world, and for good reason. It's a fantastic tour. Shout out to our tour guide, Ben. He was great. If you've seen anything about food in Iceland, you've probably seen the fermented shark. It's like one of those things that you have to try if you go to Iceland, and we tried it on the food tour, and it was pretty gross. It kind of just smelt and tasted like floor cleaner, which obviously is not appetizing at all, but I'll be honest, I expected it to be way worse. We also went to the famous hot dog stand in Reykjavik, which we had planned on going to anyway, so that worked out really well. And the best part about the hot dogs in Iceland is that they put the toppings in the bun first, and then they put the dog on top of that, so when you bite into it, nothing falls out. Genius. I don't know why we don't do that. It was a really good hot dog. They know what they're doing. The places you go to on your food tour depend on your guide, and they may switch it up depending on time of year or season or just places that they want to go to or things that they want to have you try. If you go, it's probably not going to be the same places that we went to on our trip, but here are the list of places we went to on our tour, and if you don't go to any of these places on the tour, I would still recommend checking them out. They were all fantastic. We walked through Reykjavik and stopped by Rainbow Road, which is also something you've probably seen if you've ever looked into Iceland before. It's the road with the rainbow painted on it with the church at the end of it. We did stop at the church, 1, to get out of the rain for a little bit, and 2, just because it's a really cool church. You can go to the top, but we will come back to that later. So since we were going to be in a van for 11 days, we figured we should stop somewhere and grab some snacks for our travels, and it turns out there is one Costco in Iceland. So we had to stop at the Icelandic Costco. It was also just cool to walk around and see the difference in products between America and Iceland. Then to end our day, we visited Sky Lagoon. Sky Lagoon has 3 different ticket options, and the one we got was the pure ticket. This one seems to be the most popular one. It comes with a 7-step spa treatment called The Ritual, which was really enjoyable. And spoiler alert, this was definitely our favorite of the lagoons we visited on the trip. Austin said that it felt like the adult version of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disney, which I thought was really funny because I think it's pretty accurate. Minus the pirates and boats and stuff, of course. At least at night. I don't know about during the day. They give you a wristband that you can use to get drinks with, and then at the end you pay for the drinks before you leave, but before you go, there's a cafe at the lagoon that you can grab some food at if you're hungry. We were only there at night, but we loved the atmosphere of the lagoon in the darkness. It was super relaxing and just the perfect way to end the day after a long day of travel. And then we went back to the hotel and we got some sleep and got ready for day 2. We woke up to another windy morning, but we definitely felt more rested and ready to go, so we grabbed some food at the hotel and then we hit the road to the southwest part of the country. Our first stop of the day was Midlina. This is where the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates meet, and by meet I mean there's like 50 feet between them, but there's a bridge that connects the two referred to as the Bridge Between Continents. Our next stop was a hot spring, pretty straightforward, just some steam coming out of the ground, but it was still cool. I love the landscape over here, and there was a really nice lighthouse that was very picturesque. Then we hopped over to the lava shoreline along the coast. We picked this specific viewpoint, which was gorgeous, even though the wind once again almost knocked me off my feet, but it was worth it because it was beautiful watching the waves crash against the lava rocks over here. It's such an amazing coastline. Then we went over to the volcano, which at this point had only erupted a few months prior, so we were really hoping to see some fresh lava. Something I did not realize was that there were multiple viewpoints, and the one that was closest to the eruption was an 11-mile hike each way, and unfortunately we didn't have time for that, so we went to a closer viewpoint, which still worked out because there was some active lava, so mission partially accomplished. After that, we went to the famous Blue Lagoon. If you've ever looked into anything about Iceland, you've probably seen this. It's the lagoon with the very blue colored water. They have 2 different ticket options and a whole bunch of different add-ons, but we did the Comfort, which comes with a drink, and a mud mask, which was pretty fun. This lagoon definitely had the most people, but it also felt the largest, so everyone had plenty of room to spread out. I think during a popular time of year, it would definitely feel a bit crowded, though. The mud mask was a plus, though. That was a really fun inclusion. If you're doing a shorter trip and only really have time to do one of the 2 lagoons in this area, I would suggest doing Sky Lagoon over Blue Lagoon, just because we all agreed it was the superior one, but if you have time to do both, do both. They're both worth your time. I could be wrong, but I think Blue Lagoon was the priciest lagoon we went to, and the products in the shop were also pretty pricey, so it's an expensive lagoon, but it is nice. And then we ended our day by going to the Viking Turf House restaurant, which was absolutely delicious. It was about an hour drive, so a little bit out of the way, but it was totally worth it. We got a whole feast and we went to bed very full and very happy that night. And that's also because we were happy campers. Let's go! And then we crawled inside our little house on wheels and got ready for day 3. Day 3 started off a bit cloudy and wet again, but that sure wasn't stopping us. We started off by making our way to the other area of the tectonic plate divide. This one is more of a big park that features the divide at the entrance, and it's pretty big. There's a lot of land and plenty of different trails to wander down. We didn't go too far because we didn't have too much time, but we did a nice loop around. If I were to go back, I would definitely put some time aside to explore this park more because it seemed pretty vast, and I'm sure that there's plenty of really nice areas to see here. After that, we went to the highly anticipated bread tour where they bake bread in the ground on the shore of a geothermal lake. It's so cool. Years ago, my friend found this video on YouTube of this tour of them baking the bread in the ground, and we were like, oh my god, that looks so fun, we have to do that one day. And it's always felt like this was the kickstart that made the whole trip come to fruition, so finally getting to do this felt so satisfying because it really felt like the whole thing had come full circle. And on top of that, the bread is absolutely delicious. They serve it with trout and butter, and oh my god, it's so good. They cut the bread into quarters and they sell the quarters, so of course we bought one and we snacked on it the rest of the trip. I also took the recipe card home with me so I can make the bread at home. Only downside, of course, is I have to use an oven instead of the ground, but hey, we work with what we got.
I got a slice of the bread they baked in the ground.
Then we went over to the geyser so we could see some water shoot out of the ground. The geyser goes off about every 8 to 10 minutes, so we stayed for a few cycles. Then for lunch, we stopped at this tomato restaurant, which is actually a restaurant built into a greenhouse, and the main draw is that they serve unlimited tomato soup and bread. So if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. Just skip it then. But from my understanding, it's hard to grow vegetables in Iceland, so they have greenhouses, and in this case, they built a restaurant in there, and you just go get some soup and get some bread, and you sit down and you eat as much as you want. They have a small menu of other things that you can get, but let's be honest, if you're not getting the unlimited soup, you're missing out. Then we went to Secret Lagoon, which is apparently the oldest swimming pool in Iceland. This one definitely gave off public pool vibes because that's kind of what it was. It doesn't have a funky shape, it's just a rectangle, and it doesn't have a whole spa treatment like the other lagoons. It's a nice stop and worth doing if you're in the area, but I don't think it's something worth going out of your way for unless you want to relax in like a hot spring and there isn't anything closer to you. They also have these cute little houses on the side of the pool. I don't know what they were for, but they were just sitting on this hill. And then after that, we took about a half-hour drive to Gullfoss. We arrived here just as the sun was setting, so we had to move a bit faster than we intended, and there was a big hill that we had to go down to get to the falls, so we did a nice jog down there, and we got to the viewpoint, and I'm so glad that we made it before the sun went down, because this was an amazing waterfall that I'm sure looks even nicer when the sun is in the sky, but I loved this one. And then we went to a campsite not too far away, and we parked there and we slept the night and got ready for day 4. We woke up at the crack of dawn and hit the road to get to our first stop, which was Seyðisfoss. This is one of, if not the most famous waterfall in the country. It's just another one of those things where you do research in Iceland and you see this no matter what. So this is the waterfall that you can walk behind. It's a short walk all the way around, but just be aware that depending on the weather and how the winds are blowing, you might get a little wet. When you're standing there, you really get the idea as to why this is one of the most popular waterfalls in Iceland, because especially when you're behind it, looking up and watching the water fall from the cliff into the pool is just beautiful. There's a path along the cliffside here that actually leads to another waterfall, which is inside a little cave, and you can see the waterfall from the entrance of the cave, but if you really want to experience it, you gotta go inside. There's no path into the cave, so you pretty much just have to hop along the rocks sticking out of the water and hope you don't slip and fall into the water, and then once you're inside, the water is pretty much coming down right on top of you and spraying all over the place. So if you don't have like waterproof everything, you're gonna get pretty wet. So it started to get busier now, so we head back to the car to go to our next spot, but before we left, we filled up our water bottles. So one of the cool things about Iceland is that you can fill your water bottle in like any of the running water that you see because it all comes from the glaciers and it's all fresh. So that's pretty sick. There's actually a sign in one of the campgrounds that we went to in the bathroom that said like, remember, you can fill your water bottle anywhere in Iceland. At your own risk, of course. It's pretty cool. You can just do that. You don't have to buy a water bottle. Just bring a reusable water bottle with you and you just dunk it in a river and then you're good to go. It's nice and cold. It tastes fresh. Then we drove about half an hour to Skogafoss, which is another waterfall. This one has completely flat ground and the parking lot is right there, so you don't have to walk far at all to get to it. And there isn't any kind of barrier stopping you, so you can pretty much go as close to the falls as you want, just at your own risk. The sun just coming over the hills illuminating the falls and then matched with the rainbow that formed right next to it just made it so picturesque. It was just so stunning. Then we drove 15 minutes down the road to the parking area for the plane wreck. This was a cargo plane that crashed on the black sand beach and they didn't do anything with it after it crashed, so it's just sitting there, and there's a bus that will take you there, but you are welcome to walk if you want. I believe the walk is about 45 minutes each way depending on your speed, and if you take the bus there is a $15 round trip charge. Due to our schedule, we took the bus, which turned out to be a trip through Pothole City because it was probably the bumpiest car ride I have ever experienced. You can get some awesome photos, and if it's a nice day, it's really nice just to wander around. It's always changing because of weather and time and people, so if you go, it won't look the same as it does right now, but it's a fun stop for sure. Then we went over to another part of the beach where the basalt rock columns are, and these are one of those things that just make the country feel like an entirely different planet. There's also a little cafe that you can grab a bite at. They had wonderful fish and chips. These columns are so cool. You can climb all over them and you can really go as high as you want. If you're nimble enough, you can climb up high enough so that you can get a picture with nobody else in it, because most people stick to the ones closest to the ground. But if you don't feel like climbing, you can just wander around the beach and enjoy yourself. Just like every other part of the country, this area is beautiful. So then we backtracked to the cliffs and went along this long, winding road to the top where the lookout is. And once you get out of your car and actually walk over to the edge, it's pretty jaw-dropping. You get the overlook of the beach, you can see the mountains way out there in the distance, you get a great view of the rock arch, there's a lighthouse up there. It's all just so breathtaking. You gotta be careful with the winds up there. You don't want to accidentally take a tumble because it's a long way down. On the way to our next stop, we passed through Vik, which is a very small town. I've heard of some fun things to do there, but we did not make a stop. We were just passing through. But we went about 20 minutes to the Yoda Cave. The road going to this one is off the main road, and it's pretty much just Pothole City Part 2 because it's just dirt and holes. You go down this road for a few minutes, and then there's a small parking area and the entrance to the cave. And it's small, and it doesn't look like much from the outside, but when you go inside, you see Yoda. It's really cool. And then the last thing we did this day was drive about 50 minutes to the canyon. This was another case of getting there right as the sun was going down, so we had to pick up the pace a little bit. There's a steep walk to start with that brings you to the top of the canyon, and then to go all the way to the end to the viewpoint, it's about another 20-minute walk. So if you're going, be prepared to do some walking. There are a bunch of stops and viewpoints along the way, but at the end there's a piece that juts out into the canyon that is a fantastic place to get a good look and take some great photos. I do wish we had gotten there a little bit earlier in the day because it probably would have been nice with some more light, but hey, it is what it is. And then we went to another campsite and slept and got ready for day 5. We left the campsite nice and early once again, and we drove about an hour to the Glacier Lookout Point. This is the glacier where they filmed some of the scenes in the movie Interstellar, and I am a huge fan of that movie, so this was really awesome to see. It was really quiet, but every now and then we heard a loud crack in the distance of the ice cracking, and it was pretty eerie. But aside from the random cracks, this was a really calming place to spend our morning. Then we drove about 45 minutes to our boat tour of Glacier Lagoon. We booked this in advance online, so all we had to do was show up and check in. Then you wait a few minutes and you get loaded onto the boat. They use those car boats, so you all load on and then you drive right into the water. It's a really interesting tour. It's like one of the only places in the world where you can take a tour that brings you this close to icebergs, and I definitely think it's worth doing. But I'm glad it was a nice day because this probably would have sucked if it was raining. So if you're gonna do this, just hope you get lucky like we did and you have nice weather. After the boat tour, we literally walked across the street to Diamond Beach. This is where the big chunks of ice wash up on the shore and they look like, any guesses? Anyone? Anyone?
Diamond!
Yep, big old diamonds. And then we drove about 15 minutes down the road to one of our most anticipated things on the trip, the Crystal Ice Cave Tour. This is exactly as it sounds. It's a tour of an ice cave. There are like 3 different ice cave tours that you can do, but this one seemed pretty cool to us, so we went with this one. We booked in advance online and showed up to the meeting point, and then we all got in a bus and we went to the cave. Something I found interesting were the people on our tour that seemed like they weren't expecting to go into an ice cave, even though that's what they signed up for, like by the way that they were dressed. There was one person who was wearing like designer boots and a very light jacket, and like, don't do that. Maybe be prepared to take a 4-hour hike into an ice cave, but I don't know, each their own. After we got off the bus, we had to walk about 40 minutes across a very rocky landscape to get to the entrance of the cave. The reason for the long walk is because the ice cave is slowly melting, so the entrance to the cave gets further away from the parking lot every year, unfortunately. I don't think there are really any words that can do justice to this tour, and the photos I took certainly don't do this cave any justice whatsoever, because standing there and looking up to see the ceiling glowing blue, almost like a sky, and remembering you're under multiple feet of ice is just incredible. And I think it's just one of those things that you need to be there and experience to get the full feel of, but trust me, it is just something else, man. We went further and further in until the point where we were pretty much crawling, and then we couldn't go any further, so we just all sat down and we turned off our headlamps and we got a great look at the ice glowing around us. This is a tour I would more than recommend. I can't speak for the other ice cave tours, but I'm sure they are just as amazing as this one. And I would love to go back and do the glacier walk and wander around on top of the ice now that I've experienced going inside. The whole tour is about 3 to 4 hours long, so by the time we got back, the sun was setting, and we had a pretty long drive ahead of us, so we just hit the road. We had about a 3.5 hour drive to the top of the East Coast where we would be starting our next day, so we drove into the night and we arrived at our campsite, which was probably the nicest one we had been to so far. And we took a shower and got some rest and got ready for day 6. After grabbing some breakfast, we drove about half an hour to this town. This town is where they shot one of the scenes in the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I love that movie, so it was awesome to see where they shot some of it. They have, however, since changed the color of the motel, in case you were wondering. It's a long, winding road to get down there, but once we were there, we parked next to the motel, and then we just kind of wandered around for a little bit. It was early in the morning, so it was quiet and peaceful, and it had some amazing scenery with the town being surrounded by the mountains. It was such a relaxing place, and I'm so glad we spent our morning here. And just like in Reykjavik, they also have a church with a rainbow path leading up to it. While in this town, we drove about 10 minutes to something that is classified as a sound sculpture, and we didn't have any idea where it was, and it took us a few minutes to realize that the map pinpoint was on top of a hill, so we had to figure out how to get up there, and it ended up being a little bit longer than a walk than we expected, but I haven't seen this on anyone else's itinerary, probably because it's just a concrete igloo, but it was definitely a unique find, and it was pretty fun to check out. Hello. Then we had about an hour drive to Hengafalls, which is another waterfall. The hike for this one is intense, to say the least. Another one where I didn't realize how long the hike was going to be, and it's also very steep in some areas, so it's certainly not the easiest hike in the country. It definitely got the best of us.
That's not it though. That's it up there. That's it all the way up there.
We parked at the bottom and we saw the waterfall all the way up there, and we were like, oh my god, we have to go all the way up there? There's a smaller waterfall along the way that feels like a checkpoint, and seeing the two waterfalls together was really nice. It made for a great photo. But this is where Joe tapped out, and Austin and I pressed on a little bit longer until eventually he tapped out, but I at least wanted to go until I had a nice view of the falls, so I kept going until I found this nice spot on top of a hill where I took some pictures, and I just took it all in before starting my descent. If I had some more time, I would have gone all the way, but I'm satisfied with where I stopped. Although it was still steep, going back down was way more fun than going up. Also, this goes for the whole country, but the scenery over here was gorgeous. So we went about an hour and 20 minutes to this canyon. This was one of the things that I really wanted to do. I've always thought that this canyon looked so cool, and I really wanted to check it out. So this was one of my highlights of the trip. But I didn't realize that there were two sides to the canyon, which it makes sense, but I didn't realize that you could only get down into the canyon from one side. The main viewpoint is down this long road, and then there's a parking area with some really steep steps that brings you to a viewpoint, which is really nice, but you can't get into the canyon from here. You can get into the canyon on the other side, but to get there, you have to go back the way you came, and there's a turnoff which takes you across the water to a parking area, but then you have to walk about half an hour along the river just to get to the canyon. I was pretty upset I couldn't get into the canyon, but we'll come back to that. This is a great lookout though. If you don't want to get into the canyon, we got some great pictures here, and the sun setting really brought out all the colors in the rocks. Our final stop for the day was at the Vok Baths. These are 3 big pools, but they are built on a lake. Each pool is a different temperature that ranges from warm to hottest, and you can jump into the cold lake if you really want, and then you can get back into the warm pool, but we stuck to just the pools. We skipped the lake part. Also, something that I haven't mentioned is that at all of these lagoons and hot baths, you can rent a towel if you don't have one. Some of them include the towel with your ticket purchase, and at others it was an extra charge. And something I really liked about this one was at the end they had a little tea bar, so after you get out of the baths you can pick a tea and you can drink your tea and just hang out. We ate some food at the Vok Baths and slept, which leads us into Day 7. Our original plan was to drive the night before to a different campsite, but I really wanted to go into the canyon, so I switched some things around, and in the morning I got up and drove back to the canyon, but this time went across the river and made the walk over there. I was the only one who went. Joe and Austin were pretty tired, and they wanted to sleep a little bit longer, but this was amazing. And I'm not just saying that because they didn't join me, but this was by far my favorite part of the trip. It was just beautiful. I genuinely could have stayed here all day and just wandered around taking photos for hours. The colors of the canyon and the water contrast so nice with each other, and the columns give it such a funky look. The water on the rocks was a bit frozen, so it got a little bit slippery at a few points, and there was a rope to grab onto at one point on your way down. I don't even know what the rope was attached to. I just grabbed it and shimmied my way down. If you're doing the Ring Road or just going into the north, I definitely wouldn't skip this, because if you do, it means you are missing out on one of the most beautiful parts of the country, in my opinion. So then I made the walk back, and we started our drive to Dettifoss, which is another waterfall, and while we were driving there, it felt like almost instantly the environment had changed, and there was snow all over the ground. So we pulled off to the side of the road, we took some pictures, hung out for a little bit, and Joe made a cup of coffee with the coffee that he bought at the store and the coffee press that he rented from the camper company. Then we got back on the road, and not too long after, we arrived at Dettifoss. It's a bit of a walk from the parking area to Dettifoss, and at this time of year, it was pretty muddy and icy. There's also another waterfall that wasn't too far away because there was a sign for it on the trail that we were on, but we didn't venture to that one. There were also other paths that would take you closer to the falls, but those were covered in ice, so that seems like another time of year type of thing. And then after that, we drove about 45 minutes to attempt going to the crater, but unfortunately, those roads were closed due to ice also. So instead, we turned around and went to the geyser strip, but on our way, we came across a geothermal shower in the middle of nowhere, so Joe took a shower. So then we went to the geyser strip, which was really cool, but it smells like eggs because of the sulfur in the ground. So if you don't like the smell of eggs, I would suggest either bringing something to plug your nose or just skip this entirely. It is really cool though. The steam coming out of the ground with the sun behind it at this time of day was beautiful, but unfortunately we could only spend so much time there because eventually the smell was really getting to us and it was really strong. Then we went to Godafoss, which is another waterfall, and once again this one was really beautiful, but a lot of viewpoints here were coated in a sheet of ice, so we had to be very careful when walking around. Then we drove about half an hour to Akureyri, which is the second largest city in Iceland and is located at the top of the country. And you have to go through this long tunnel, but the tunnel spits you out right across the water from the city, and it was gorgeous at this time of day. The lights of the city reflecting on the water with the setting sun was just beautiful. So we drove into the city and ate dinner at this delicious restaurant and also saw this really cool church that was lit purple and looked very ominous. We also had our fingers crossed that we would be able to see the northern lights because every time we looked at the forecast, it was like low to no visibility, but we were in the north now, so we were hoping there was a better chance of seeing them, and we were getting a little bit nervous, but they finally did make an appearance. And then we went to the campsite and slept and got ready for day 8. This day consisted of a lot of driving, but we wanted to do some exploring in the city before we got on the road. So we got some breakfast and we did some wandering. We checked out the grocery store and then popped into a few different shops here and there to see what they had and grabbed some souvenirs. Something else fun about this city is that the stoplights and the traffic lights are little hearts, so that's cute. So we hit the road, we put our Toblerones that we bought at the grocery store in our built-in Toblerone holder in the van, and then we were off for about another 2 hours and 20 minutes, but the scenery is beautiful to look at, so it was a super relaxing drive. But after our drive, we ended up, that's right, you guessed it, at another waterfall. Except this one had a little tiny canyon attached to it. You have to go down this long dirt road to get to it, but once you're there, it's flat ground and it's pretty straightforward. A lot of ice here, the waterfall was like half frozen, and some of the paths were too icy to walk down, but still a great stop. Then we actually backtracked a little bit and went about 40 minutes north to this big rock that's just on the beach and sticks out of the water depending on what time you're there, but it was beautiful. After you park, there are two paths that you can take. There's the one that's longer that goes all the way around and down gradually, or you can go straight down the cliffside. That's the option that we took. It's a little bit steep. You pretty much got to shimmy yourself down the rocks, but we did fine. There was like a family of 4 here with 2 parents and 2 very small children trying to like shimmy their way down the cliffside. And like every move the kids made, the parents would just yell at them. And like, I don't know if this is the place to bring your kids in this country. Either take the long way or maybe don't bring your kids here. There's plenty of other things to do with your kids than this rock. Then we did another long drive about 3 hours into the night. We grabbed some dinner and eventually made it to the campsite where we slept and got ready for Day 9. Day 9 brings us to what is probably the best named thing in Iceland, which is the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. Come on, that's great. We had about a 45-minute drive to our next stop, which was this mountain, and you already know this mountain comes with a waterfall, baby. Let's go! This is the most photographed mountain in the country, and I believe it was also in some scenes of the show Game of Thrones, so if you've seen that show, you've probably seen this mountain before. So then after wandering around there for a little bit, we took our journey around the rest of the peninsula. Drove about 30 minutes to the Black Church that's right on the coast. It's a super simple stop. It's just a little church. It just looks really cool. And then from there we drove about 14 minutes to this gorge. You park and then you have to walk a few minutes to the entrance, and inside I'm not sure how deep it goes. I didn't go that far in. I pretty much just stayed in the entrance area, but it's really nice. And then 7 minutes from there to get to a whole bunch of stuff along the coast. There was the rock arch, the stone bridge, this big rock sculpture, a bunch of stuff to look at. My comment from earlier in the trip about the coastline being really beautiful still stands. We hit this area at the perfect time of day. It looked gorgeous. Then we drove about 10 minutes up the road to another section of the beach on the coastline. Not really sure why we chose this exact spot. It just seemed cool, and it was. I loved the smooth little black pebbles that made up this beach, and the surrounding rocks had this reddish rust color to them that contrasted really well with all the black pebbles. Just a really peaceful place to be for a little bit. Then we drove 13 minutes to the crater. This is a big old crater with a whole lot of stairs to get up to the top. The stairs aren't that steep, there's just a lot of them, but it's a great view at the top though, so it's totally worth it. Then after that, we went 8 minutes down the road to this little thing called the Well of the Irish. And I don't know how many people know that this thing exists, because there wasn't anyone there, and I hadn't seen anyone talk about this. I mean, it's just like a hole in the ground. It's this like old well that is no longer a well, and it has this whalebone. But the whalebone, when you're down there, looks like a big spider. It's so weird. I just kind of like came across this as we were driving, and I was like, oh, let's stop at this. And I mean, you can't see it. It's in the ground, so like if you're driving by it, you don't even really know it's there. Then we drove about 8 minutes to this boat that's just sitting on the beach. It's just an old rusty boat that is just on the beach, and we climbed all over it and took some great photos. So after that, our original plan was go to the Kuroma hot springs baths the next day, but we all agreed that we liked ending our days on the baths because it was just super relaxing. So instead, we changed our reservation to this night instead, and we drove over that way. Instead of spending the night here at a campsite, we decided to drive back down to Reykjavik, so this way in the morning we could start our day in Reykjavik and not have to do any driving. On the way down, we saw the northern lights again, and then we slept and got ready for day 10. Woke up nice and early in the morning, got some food at this bakery/restaurant, which was super busy, but it was totally worth the wait because the food was amazing. We find ourselves back at the church because if you remember, last time we didn't go to the top, so we decided to do that, and I'm really glad we waited because the weather was much more clear today and we had a great view. We did some more exploring in the city, we did some shopping, we hit up American Bar because we felt like we were obligated to, and then we hit up this soup restaurant, and it was the perfect place to have our final meal. Then we went back to the campsite and got some sleep for our final day, which was day 11, our last day in Iceland. So on our final day of our trip to Iceland, we woke up, we went to the car wash to wash off the car and clean it out before we returned it, and then we dropped off the car and we headed to the airport.
We did it. Iceland!
Grabbed some final things on our way out to take back with us, and just like that, we were on our way home. This was a trip that was in the making for so long, and it honestly doesn't even feel like it happened. It all worked out so well, and we were so happy with our experience, and now having been there, I can advocate that Iceland is an incredible country with some of the nicest people I've ever met. If you've ever wanted to go, I think you should, and if you've never really looked into traveling to Iceland, I encourage you to check it out because you might find something that catches your attention. I think this should apply to anywhere that you're traveling, but if you manage to find yourself amongst the beautiful landscapes of Iceland, make sure you don't forget to just be present. It's easy to forget when there's so much going on all the time and you may be on a tight schedule like we were, but we always made sure to take a minute to stop and remember where we were and take it all in because we had worked really hard to make this happen and we finally had the chance to be part of this incredible place, even if it was just for a few days. Reminding ourselves not only that we did it, but we were so grateful to have had the opportunity to do it. I know trips like this aren't the easiest and most affordable thing to pull off, but if there's anywhere that you want to go to, try your best to go. It took us a long time to put this thing together, but all the hours of research and the time spent making the itinerary were totally worth it in the end. We're just three guys that want to travel and see the world any chance we can get, and while there's plenty out there for us to still see, I'm glad we got to check this amazing country off of our list. But we didn't see it all, so I know we'll be back again at some point.